So I didn't think I'd be making another Battlefield 2042 video until Season 1 launches in the summer. There have been some things going on that I wanted to quickly discuss. First is a bit of news regarding map design. I'll link the blog post from DICE in the description if you want to read it, as well as a nice video from JackFrags kind of summarizing everything. If you don't want to link hop, essentially DICE is softly admitting that they messed up on the maps and that they need to fix them, starting with Kaleidoscope. Personally, I'm a bit disappointed with the pacing of tackling some of these issues, but I will say it's great that they're working to address them. Honestly, I'm very curious what the game will look like in the holiday season of this year. It might finally resemble what we all expected from the game in the first place. It's also come out in a reply that specialists are being discussed at DICE in the context of how to handle them moving forward. I don't expect this to be a full-blown removal and return to the classic class system, but we might see something like I described in a previous video where specialists and the equipment and weapons they have at their disposal are locked to specific classes. This is all pretty cool and interesting stuff, and I recommend checking out those links in the description, but the main topic I really wanted to discuss here is a bit of a disagreement, you could maybe even call it a spat, between the creators Bigfry and DANNYonPC over DICE reusing a character model. Essentially, the Falk character model has been used in multiple DICE games prior to 2042, and is obviously now being used in 2042 as the Falk character, one of the medic specialists in the game. Basically, Bigfry expresses a lot of contempt over perceived lazy development, while Danny counters with asset reuse being common practice in the industry, even going so far as to make an entire video demonstrating some assets that have been popping up across several Battlefield games. I wanted to take this opportunity to weigh in because I feel like I have a unique perspective here. I'm a professional software engineer as my career, but I also studied film and creative writing in college and have a decent understanding of narrative, characters, and general artistic direction. So the software engineer part of me sees what Danny is saying, and to a degree he's right. Assets get reused all the time, whether it's a building model in a video game like he describes, or a button in a mobile application, or an animation that responds to some sort of user event as the user interacts with whatever piece of software. Modularity and reusability is not just common practice in software engineering, it's also sensible development. It's something you learn from the very beginning, is that the things that you create should be reusable in multiple parts of your product. It saves time and effort on writing the same code repeatedly, offers user experiences that are both consistent and predictable so that the user can focus on the more important aspects of using the software. But this is kind of where some of my agreement with Danny ends, and where I feel he kind of misunderstands Bigfry's point entirely. The problem is not that a thing from previous DICE games is being reused in a new one. Again, that's common practice and encouraged, and I have no problem with that. The problem is that a unique character with a name, a personality, a backstory is just a generic character model, and it shows both laziness and very likely, and honestly, a lack of time for development and design teams to work on these characters. But to get a clear idea of what I mean, let's take a look at this in the context of a movie. So let's take the Lord of the Rings trilogy for example. I wanted to use this because it's a series of related entries like Battlefield, and it's widely regarded as a masterpiece of cinema. I really love the Lord of the Rings movies, and I think it will suit this metaphor in comparison pretty well. So if you watch Danny's video, he spends a lot of time talking about building models and other small assets that can be found on a map and how they pop up in several games. He demonstrates it in great detail. He then uses this to justify using the character model that is also used for Falk in 2042. So obviously I don't know all of the details behind production of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, but just from my general knowledge of how films get produced, I'm sure there are tons of props that get reused. The cloaks that all the hobbits wear, like Frodo and Sam and Merry and Pippin, pieces of armor and weaponry for background soldiers, general scenery that fills out a shot like rocks and debris. I'm sure a ton of that stuff is reused. It could even be that in one scene Frodo is wearing a cloak that Merry was wearing in another. You might see a soldier in the background wearing a breastplate that a different soldier wore in the background of a different area of Middle-earth. Another scene in the same movie, or in a previous movie, or in a future movie. I'm sure even in the background with the extras that there's repeats of people if you really looked close and paid attention. Maybe there's some generic man or woman or child in the background in Minas Tirith, and they also pop up as a generic man or woman or child in Rohan. Obviously the same face and body because they're the same person, but within the world of the movie they are not the same person. And this is okay because generally speaking, these props and extras are just set dressing. They're just there to create a bit of scenery in line with the audience's expectations. So if the characters are in a city, we expect to see a lot of people around them. We don't need to pay attention to those people around them, but we just want to see people. and this creates a bit more immersion in what we're viewing. The viewer isn't going to have their eyes pinned on all of these extras in the background. They're not going to be examining the stitching of a cloak to see if it's the same one that a different character wore in their scene. They're not going to examine the handle of a sword or the pattern of a shield to make sure it didn't pop up elsewhere. These things, like I said, are just set dressing, and the viewers are more fixated on the unique main characters on the screen that have distinct looks from the extras, whether it's just that the actor looks different, or their costuming, or their hair and makeup, anything like that. But now let's take a second to imagine that every male character between 15 and 30 is played by Elijah Wood. Every male character between, 30 and 50 is played by Viggo Mortensen. Might be dressed a little differently, but they are the same actors. I think you get the idea here. How are we as viewers supposed to care so much about Frodo, Aragorn, or Gandalf? It would just be lazy filmmaking to not cast enough actors to fill out the world, and quite honestly, it would be unacceptable. This is really where I think Danny misses the mark and why Bigfry is also so frustrated. The specialists in 2042 already have issues with how they fit into the previously established lore of the world with the war-torn, very dystopian environment. And even more, I'm supposed to care about these characters. Specialists are supposed to be the basis of the story moving forward. As we've heard before, they're supposed to pop up in other games, and we as the gamers are supposed to want to buy skins for them based on some sort of attachment to the characters, whether it's their look or their personality. And it's much more difficult to develop these attachments when they are not unique. Previous Battlefield games, having everyone look the same made sense. Those games, the player was one among many, a small piece of a larger whole, and from a creative standpoint, it almost serves as a bit of layered commentary about how war turns real people, their real lives, and complexity of their personalities into essentially just being cogs in the war machine. 2042 doesn't want us to feel like the specialists are one of many. Quite the opposite, actually. They're supposed to be unique, special, interesting, captivating, and experts at what they do. How can we feel that way when those same emotions weren't channeled into the creations of these characters? Especially something like Falk, it doesn't feel like there was much love or consideration put into the character when the model just gets reused. Anyway, I think I've said about enough at this point. I just wanted to round this out by saying I respect both Danny and Bigfry a lot, and I like the content from both of them. I just wanted to give my perspective here. But with that, I want to hear from you in the comments. What do you think about the same character model from previous games being used for Falk? Does it matter to you, or would you have preferred something more unique? Leave those thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to have a conversation. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to drop a like, and if you didn't, leave a dislike so I know you need to change something. Subscribe if you're new. We've got a video coming up covering the World War III update that just dropped, and you won't want to miss it. With that, I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.